bear cub was taped to a Ferris wheel. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The summer fair in Pine Creek Valley was the highlight of the year. Bright colored lights danced across the evening sky as children laughed and adults reminisced about their own childhood memories. The smell of cotton candy and funnel cakes filled the air, mingling with the scent of fresh pine from the surrounding forest. The centerpiece of the fair was the giant Ferris wheel that towered above everything else, its lights creating a halo against the darkening sky. Ruby Winters pushed the stroller containing her 9-month-old daughter, Lily, through the crowded fairgrounds. Lily's eyes were wide with wonder, taking in all the sights and sounds around her. Her tiny hands reached out, trying to grasp at the colorful lights that seemed just within reach. "Look at that, sweetie," Ruby cooed, pointing to the Ferris wheel. "Maybe when you're older we can ride it together." Ruby's husband, Theo, had gone to buy tickets for the carousel, leaving Ruby and Lily to wander through the fair. The air was warm, and the distant sound of a local band playing country music added to the festive atmosphere. Unknown to the fairgoers, just beyond the tree line, a mother bear and her cub were foraging for food. The summer had been harsh, with berries and nuts scarce due to an unexpected drought. The smell of food from the fair had drawn them closer than they would normally venture to human settlements. The bear cub, curious and playful, strayed from its mother's side, following the enticing scents. Its small nose twitched as it moved closer to the edge of the forest, the bright lights of the fair reflecting in its dark eyes. At the same time, a group of 4 teenagers, Dallas, Vince, Zeke, and Tori, were bored with the usual fair attractions. They'd been coming to the Pine Creek Valley Fair since they were kids, and now, at 17, they were looking for something more exciting. "This place is dead," Dallas complained, kicking an empty soda can. His dark hair fell over one eye and he brushed it away with an impatient gesture. Vince nodded in agreement, scrolling through his phone. "Yeah, same old lame rides and games. Nothing ever changes in this town." Zeke, the tallest of the group, nudged Tori and pointed toward the forest edge. "Hey, look at that. Is that what I think it is?" Tori squinted in the direction he was pointing. "No way. Is that a bear cub?" The 4 teenagers watched as the small bear hesitantly emerged from the tree line, drawn by the smell of discarded food near the back of the food stalls. The cub was no bigger than a medium-sized dog, its fur a rich brown that appeared almost black in the evening light. "Dude, we should catch it," Dallas said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "Are you crazy?" Tori asked, though there was a hint of excitement in her voice. "Its mother is probably nearby." Zeke shook his head. "Nah, if the mother was close, it wouldn't be wandering around alone. It's probably lost or something." The 4 exchanged looks, a silent agreement passing between them. They had been looking for excitement, and this was the most interesting thing that had happened all night. As Ruby pushed Lily's stroller past the carousel, searching for Theo among the crowd, she had no idea of the cruel plan forming in the minds of the teenagers, or how her baby daughter would soon become entangled in an event that would change the lives of everyone at the fair. The bear cub continued to sniff around the discarded food, unaware of the danger approaching. Its mother called from the forest, a low, worried sound that was drowned out by the music and laughter of the fair. The cub, distracted by the new smells and sights, didn't hear the warning. Dallas slowly approached the cub, gesturing for the others to spread out around it. "We'll trap it between us. Zeke, you got that duct tape in your backpack, right? The one we were going to use for the prank at school." Zeke nodded, slipping his backpack off his shoulder and pulling out a roll of silver duct tape. "What are you thinking, Dallas?" A slow, cruel smile spread across Dallas's face as he looked up at the Ferris wheel glowing against the night sky. "I'm thinking we're about to make this fair a lot more interesting." The teenagers moved with practiced stealth, closing in on the unsuspecting bear cub. The little creature was too busy pawing at a half-eaten corn dog to notice the danger approaching from all sides. Dallas gave a quick nod, and they rushed forward together. The cub let out a startled yelp as Zeke threw his jacket over it, muffling its cries and temporarily blinding it. "Quick, grab its legs!" Dallas ordered as the cub squirmed and thrashed under the jacket. Vince hesitated for a split second. "Are you sure about this? What if someone sees us?" "Don't be such a wimp," Tori snapped, already helping Dallas secure the struggling cub. "Nobody's paying attention to us back here. Everyone's too busy having family fun." The way she said those last two words dripped with disdain. Zeke handed the duct tape to Dallas, who tore off a long strip with his teeth. The cub's frightened whimpers tore through the night air, but were indeed lost amid the cacophony of the fair. The blaring music, the mechanical whirring of rides, and the constant chatter of the crowd. "What exactly are we doing with it?" Zeke asked, helping hold the cub down as Dallas began wrapping tape around its small body. "We're going to give it the ride of its life," Dallas answered, nodding toward the Ferris wheel. "We'll tape it to one of the seats when nobody's looking. Imagine the freak-out when people notice a bear flying through the air." The cub's struggles grew weaker as more tape restricted its movement. Its terrified eyes darted between the teenagers' faces, looking for mercy but finding none. By the time they were done, the small creature was wrapped in a tight cocoon of silver duct tape, only its head and the tip of its tail left free. "Perfect," Dallas grinned, picking up their captive. "Now, we just need to time this right." On the other side of the fair, Ruby was growing concerned. Theo should have returned with the carousel tickets by now. She checked her phone, no messages. With a sigh, she turned Lily's stroller around, deciding to go look for him. "Let's go find Daddy, shall we?" she said to Lily, who was becoming fussy in her seat. As they moved through the crowd, Ruby noticed a commotion near the ticket booth. People were gathered around something, and there seemed to be some kind of argument happening. She pushed the stroller closer, trying to see what was going on. "I'm telling you, my wallet was right here in my pocket." It was Theo's voice, strained and upset. "I had it when I got in line." Ruby hurried forward. "Theo, what's wrong?" Theo turned to her, his face flushed with frustration. "Someone picked my pocket. My wallet's gone with all our cash and cards." Ruby's hand flew to her mouth. "Are you sure? Did you check all your pockets?" "Of course I did," Theo snapped, then immediately looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's just, this ruins everything. We should probably just go home." "Sir, would you like to file a report?" A security guard had appeared beside them, notepad in hand. "We've had a few incidents tonight. Might be the same group." While Theo spoke with the security guard, Lily began to cry, her earlier contentment giving way to hunger and tiredness. Ruby rocked the stroller back and forth, trying to soothe her, but the baby's cries only grew louder. "Shh, it's okay, sweetie," Ruby whispered, kneeling down to stroke Lily's cheek. "We'll go home soon." But Lily wasn't just hungry or tired. Her eyes were fixed on something beyond Ruby's shoulder, and her cries had taken on a different quality, almost as if she were trying to alert her mother to something. Ruby turned to follow her daughter's gaze but saw only the usual fair crowd. Meanwhile, the teenagers had made their way to the Ferris wheel, carrying their taped captive hidden inside Zeke's backpack, with just enough opening for the cub to breathe. The line for the ride wasn't long. Most families with young children had already left for the night, and the remaining crowd consisted mostly of couples and groups of friends. "Remember the plan," Dallas whispered as they approached the front of the line. "Tori and I will get in first. Zeke and Vince, you take the seat right after us. When the operator is helping the next people, that's when we do it." The Ferris wheel operator was an older man named Earl, who had been running this ride for over 20 years. He was tired after a long day, and his attention was not as sharp as it should have been. When Dallas and Tori took their seat, he secured the safety bar with a practiced motion and moved on to the next car. As Earl helped Zeke and Vince into their seat, Dallas quickly stood up, ignoring the safety bar that was supposed to keep him in place. "Now," he hissed to Tori, who reached into Zeke's backpack and pulled out the terrified cub. With quick, furtive movements, Dallas used more duct tape from his pocket to secure the cub to the outside of their Ferris wheel car, positioning it so it would be visible to the crowd below once the ride started moving. The cub let out a muffled cry, but Dallas slapped a final piece of tape over its snout. "Shut up, you stupid animal," he growled, giving the tape one final pat to make sure it was secure. He barely managed to sit back down before Earl turned back to them, none the wiser about what had just happened. The ride jerked into motion, and the teenagers struggled to contain their laughter as their car began its ascent. "This is so messed up," Vince said from the car behind them, but there was a nervous excitement in his voice rather than disapproval. The bear cub, now suspended on the outside of the Ferris wheel car, was in full panic. Its eyes were wide with terror as the ground fell away beneath it. The tape across its snout prevented it from crying out, but its body trembled violently with each rotation of the wheel. Back at the security station, Theo had finished filing his report about the stolen wallet. The guard had been sympathetic, but not particularly hopeful about recovering their money. "I guess we should head home," Theo said defeatedly to Ruby. "I'm really sorry about tonight." Ruby squeezed his arm reassuringly. "It's not your fault. These things happen." But as they turned to leave, Lily's cries escalated into full-blown screams. Her tiny face was red with effort, and she was pointing frantically toward the center of the fair. "What's wrong with her?" Theo asked, alarmed by the intensity of Lily's distress. Ruby shook her head, equally confused. "I don't know. She was fine earlier." Lily continued to scream and point, tears streaming down her face. Ruby followed the direction of her daughter's gesture and realized she was pointing at the Ferris wheel. "Maybe she wants to look at the lights?" Ruby suggested, wheeling the stroller closer to the ride to appease her daughter. But as they approached, Lily's cries didn't subside. If anything, they grew more urgent. Other fairgoers were beginning to look at them, some with sympathy, others with annoyance at the disruption. And then, as the Ferris wheel turned, Ruby saw something that made her blood run cold. There, attached to the outside of one of the cars near the top of the wheel, was what looked like a small, dark bundle. At first, she thought it might be a stuffed animal or some kind of decoration, but then the bundle moved, struggling against whatever was holding it in place. "Oh my God!" Ruby gasped, grabbing Theo's arm so hard he winced. "Theo, look, there's something. I think that's an animal up there." Theo squinted up at the Ferris wheel, following Ruby's pointing finger. "What? I don't—" Then he saw it too. "Jesus Christ, what is that?" By now, others in the crowd had also noticed. Voices rose in confusion and alarm. "Is that a dog? Who would do such a thing?" Somebody stopped the ride. But the Ferris wheel continued its slow revolution, carrying the terrified cub higher into the air. From their vantage point at the top of the wheel, Dallas and his friends were watching the crowd's reaction with growing delight. "Look at them all freaking out," Dallas laughed, filming the scene with his phone. "This is going viral for sure." Tori, however, was beginning to look uneasy. Maybe we should have just scared it, not actually taped it up there. What if it falls? "It's not going to fall," Dallas said dismissively. "That tape could hold a person." In the growing commotion below, no one noticed the movement at the edge of the forest. The mother bear, having lost track of her cub for too long, had followed its scent to the fairgrounds. She stood on her hind legs at the forest's edge, her sensitive nose catching the scent of her cub's fear on the wind. Her eyes, keener than any human's in the twilight, spotted her baby's dark form against the lights of the Ferris wheel. A low growl rumbled in her chest, audible only to the small woodland creatures that scattered in her wake as she dropped to all fours and began to move toward the fair. Her maternal instinct overrode her natural fear of humans and their strange structures. There was only one thought in her mind now: reach her cub. In the midst of the growing chaos, Lily's screams had taken on a rhythm almost like words, as if the baby was trying desperately to communicate something beyond her limited vocabulary. Her eyes never left the struggling cub on the Ferris wheel, and her tiny hands reached out toward it, opening and closing in distress. Ruby, still holding Theo's arm, suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. She looked down at her daughter, then back up at the trapped animal, and a strange thought occurred to her, one that made no logical sense but felt undeniably true in that moment. Lily knew. Somehow, her baby had sensed the cub's distress before anyone else had noticed it. The crowd around the Ferris wheel was growing larger and louder. Someone had finally alerted Earl, the operator, who was now frantically trying to bring the ride to a safe stop. His weathered face had gone pale as he realized what was happening on his watch. "Everybody stay calm," he shouted, though his own voice was anything but calm. "I'm stopping the ride. Just don't anybody panic." But panic was already setting in. Parents were pulling their children away from the ride, and several people were on their phones, presumably calling 911. The festive atmosphere of the fair had evaporated, replaced by a tense, fearful energy that seemed to crackle in the air like electricity before a storm. And at the edge of the crowd, moving with purpose through the shadows between the food stalls and game booths, a dark shape was getting closer, drawn by the scent of her cub and the sound of human voices raised in alarm. The night was about to take an even more unexpected turn, and at the center of it all, a baby who couldn't even speak yet somehow seemed to understand exactly what was happening. Officer Diane Mercer had been patrolling the outskirts of the fair when the call came in over her radio. She'd been a police officer in Pine Creek Valley for 15 years, and in that time, she'd responded to her fair share of fair-related incidents, mostly lost children, the occasional pickpocket, and tipsy teenagers trying to sneak alcohol onto the grounds. But never, in all her years of service, had she heard a call quite like this. "Repeat that, dispatch," she said into her radio, certain she had misheard. "Reports of an animal, possibly a bear cub, taped to the Ferris wheel." The dispatcher's voice crackled back. Multiple callers. Situation escalating. Diane's stomach dropped. She immediately turned her patrol car around and headed toward the center of the fairgrounds, flipping on her lights but leaving the siren off to avoid adding to the panic. As she drove, she radioed for animal control backup. "Any word on whether there's a mother bear in the vicinity?" she asked, knowing that where there was a cub, a protective mother was rarely far behind. "Negative," the dispatcher replied, "but we've got calls coming in from all over the fair now. People are starting to panic." Diane pressed her foot harder on the accelerator. A panicked crowd could be just as dangerous as a protective mother bear. Meanwhile, the Ferris wheel had grown to a stop, with Dallas and Tori's car positioned near the very top. The cub was still taped to the outside of their car, visible to everyone below. The teenagers' initial amusement had curdled into something more complicated as they realized the scale of the commotion they had caused. "They're calling the cops," Zeke hissed from the car behind them, leaning forward as far as the safety bar would allow. "We're gonna get arrested." Dallas's face had gone pale beneath his usual bravado. "Shut up. They don't know it was us." "Are you kidding?" Tori snapped, no longer finding any of this funny. "We're literally sitting in the car with the bear taped to it. Everyone can see us." The cub had stopped struggling as vigorously, its strength sapped by fear and the constricting tape. Its dark eyes rolled wildly in its head, and its breathing came in rapid, shallow pants. The tape across its snout prevented it from making noise, but its terror was evident in every trembling inch of its small body. Down below, the crowd had grown to over 100 people. Some were filming with their phones. Others were shouting at Earl to get the people down from the Ferris wheel, and still others were simply watching in horrified fascination. Earl, overwhelmed by the situation, was arguing with his teenage assistant about the best way to unload the passengers safely. "We can't just start it up again," the assistant was saying. "What if the animal falls? If we don't get those people down, we're going to have an even bigger problem." Earl shot back, his hand shaking as he gripped the control panel. Ruby and Theo had pushed their way to the front of the crowd, with Lily still screaming in her stroller. The baby's face was streaked with tears, and her cries had a desperate, almost pleading quality that tore at Ruby's heart. "We need to do something," Ruby said to Theo, raising her voice to be heard over the crowd's noise. Theo looked up at the trapped cub, then back at his distraught daughter. "What can we do? We can't exactly climb up there." Ruby bit her lip, feeling helpless. Then, just as she was about to suggest they move Lily away from the upsetting scene, she noticed something strange. Lily's cries had changed. They weren't just screams anymore. They had a pattern, almost like she was trying to call out to the cub. "Listen," Ruby said, grabbing Theo's arm. "Do you hear that? The way she's crying?" Theo cocked his head, skeptical at first. Then his expression changed to one of surprise. "That's weird. It almost sounds like—" But he never finished his sentence, because at that moment a terrified scream cut through the night air from the other side of the crowd. "Bear! There's a bear!" The crowd's attention whipped from the Ferris wheel to the source of the scream. A woman was pointing frantically toward the food stalls, where a large shadow was moving with deliberate purpose toward the center of the fair. The mother bear had arrived. Panic erupted instantly. People scattered in all directions, pushing and shoving in their desperate attempt to get away from the bear. Parents grabbed their children, couples clutched each other's hands, and individuals ran blindly, often colliding with one another in their haste. "Run!" someone shouted. "It's coming this way." The mother bear, however, wasn't interested in the fleeing humans. Her gaze was fixed upward, on the small dark shape attached to the strange, towering structure. She let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the ground beneath the remaining fairgoers' feet. Officer Mercer arrived at the scene just in time to see the chaos unfold. She jumped out of her patrol car and immediately assessed the situation. The trapped cub, the panicking crowd, and now the mother bear advancing steadily toward the Ferris wheel. "Dispatch, we have a code 3, she radioed quickly. Mother bear on the fairgrounds, cub still trapped on the Ferris wheel. We need animal control now, and all available units for crowd control. She grabbed her loudspeaker from the car. Everyone remain calm and move slowly away from the area, she announced, though she knew the advice was probably futile given the level of panic already spreading. Up on the Ferris wheel, the teenagers were watching the unfolding chaos with growing horror. "Oh my God," Tori whispered, her face ashen as she spotted the mother bear below. "We're gonna die up here." For once, Dallas had nothing smart to say. He stared down at the bear, then at the cub still taped to their car, the full consequences of his prank finally dawning on him. "The tape," he suddenly said, his voice hoarse. "We need to get the tape off it." "Are you crazy?" Zeke called from behind them. "Don't touch it." "If we free it, maybe the mother will just take it and leave," Dallas reasoned, already reaching for the edge of their car where the cub was secured. Vince leaned forward, his eyes wide. "Dallas, don't! You'll fall!" But Dallas was already halfway out of his seat, stretching his arm toward the trapped cub. The safety bar dug into his stomach as he reached, his fingers just brushing the edge of the duct tape. The car swayed slightly with his movement, causing the cub to let out a muffled whimper that was somehow audible even above the chaos below. Ruby and Theo, meanwhile, had been caught in the middle of the fleeing crowd. They were trying to push Lily's stroller toward the exit, but the crush of panicking people made it nearly impossible to move. "We're not going to make it through like this," Theo shouted, seeing how people were bottlenecking at the narrow fair exit. Ruby looked around frantically, searching for another way out. Her eyes fell on a small service gate near the back of the fairgrounds, away from both the bear and the main crowd. "There," she pointed. "Let's go that way." They changed direction, fighting against the flow of people. Ruby kept one hand firmly on the stroller and used her other arm to create a buffer zone, preventing others from knocking into Lily. But the baby was no longer crying out in distress. Instead, Lily had gone oddly quiet, her eyes fixed on something above them. Ruby followed her daughter's gaze and gasped. One of the teenagers was halfway out of the Ferris wheel car, reaching for the cub. One wrong move and he would fall to the ground below. "That idiot's going to get himself killed," Theo muttered, seeing the same thing. Just then, the mother bear let out a roar that seemed to shake the very ground. The few people who had been frozen in place now broke into fresh panic, creating another surge in the crowd that nearly separated Ruby from the stroller. "Hold on," she cried, gripping the handle tighter. But as they struggled to make headway toward the service gate, something even more unexpected happened. Lily suddenly reached up and unbuckled her stroller straps. Before Ruby could react, the baby had wriggled free and tumbled onto the ground. "Lily!" Ruby screamed, dropping to her knees to reach for her daughter. But Lily, displaying coordination that seemed impossible for a 9-month-old, had already crawled several feet away, moving purposefully toward the Ferris wheel and the mother bear. Theo lunged after her, but another surge in the crowd pushed him back. "Ruby, get her!" Ruby scrambled forward on her hands and knees, her heart pounding in her chest. "Lily, stop! Come back!" Officer Mercer, who had been trying to establish a perimeter around the bear, spotted the baby crawling across the open space. Her blood ran cold. "Oh God, no!" she breathed, immediately changing direction to intercept the child. But she was too far away, and the bear was much closer to Lily than she was. The mother bear, sensing movement nearby, turned her massive head toward the crawling baby. Her dark eyes fixed on the tiny human, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Every person who witnessed this moment would later describe it differently. Some would say the bear looked ready to charge. Others would insist it seemed confused, and a few would claim there was something like recognition in its gaze. Lily stopped crawling when she was about 10 feet from the bear. She sat up and lifted her tiny hands, palms outward, toward the massive animal. And then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, she made a sound. Not a cry or a scream, but a soft crooning noise that rose and fell in a pattern that sounded uncannily like the call of a bear cub. The mother bear's ears twitched. She lowered her head slightly, nostrils flaring as she caught the baby's scent. The crowd held its collective breath, too shocked even to scream warnings. Ruby was frozen in place, one arm outstretched toward her daughter, a silent prayer on her lips. Up on the Ferris wheel, Dallas had managed to tear away part of the tape securing the cub. The small animal's front paw was now free, and it was scratching weakly at its restraints. "Almost got it," Dallas grunted, stretching farther out to reach more of the tape. But his words were drowned out by a sudden, strange sound from below, the sound of Lily's cub-like call echoing across the fairgrounds. The cub's head jerked up at the sound, its ears pivoting forward with interest. It let out a muffled response through the tape still covering its snout. The mother bear's reaction was immediate and shocking. She looked from Lily up to the Ferris wheel, then back to Lily again, as if making a connection. She let out a soft chuff that was neither threatening nor afraid, just questioning. And in that critical moment, something extraordinary happened. Lily made the sound again, but this time she pointed one chubby finger upward toward the trapped cub. It was such a deliberate human gesture that several onlookers gasped. The bear followed the baby's pointing finger, focusing again on her cub trapped high above. Officer Mercer, who had been slowly approaching with her tranquilizer gun ready, paused in disbelief. In her 15 years on the force, she had never seen anything like this. A baby seemingly communicating with a wild bear. The mother bear looked back at Lily once more, then raised herself onto her hind legs, standing nearly 7 feet tall. From this position, she could better see her cub on the Ferris wheel. She let out a low, mournful sound that carried clearly through the now silent fairgrounds. The cub responded with renewed struggles, somehow sensing its mother's presence. Dallas, still precariously balanced, had managed to remove enough tape that the cub's upper body was now free. It squirmed more vigorously, threatening to fall. "I've almost got it," Dallas called down, not realizing how his words carried in the strange silence that had fallen. Just a little more. Ruby had finally broken free of her shock and was inching toward Lily, moving slowly so as not to startle the bear. "Baby, don't move," she whispered, though she knew Lily was too young to understand the warning. But Lily seemed to have her own agenda. She made the cub-like sound once more, then deliberately pointed again at the Ferris wheel before bringing her hand down in a sweeping motion toward the ground, as if instructing the bear to wait for her cub to come down. The mother bear dropped back to all fours and took a step backward, her eyes never leaving the baby. It was almost as if she understood. Up above, Dallas had managed to remove most of the tape. The cub was hanging on by just one section around its back leg. "Guys, it's almost free," he called to his friends, who were watching in terrified fascination. "Be careful," Tori pleaded, gripping the safety bar so hard her knuckles were white. With one final tug, Dallas tore away the last piece of tape. The cub, suddenly free, scrambled to find purchase on the smooth metal of the Ferris wheel car. Its claws scraped desperately against the surface as it started to slip. "No!" Dallas lunged farther out, trying to catch the cub before it fell, but he was too late. The bear cub plummeted toward the ground, a small dark shape against the night sky. Screams erupted from the crowd that had been holding its collective breath. Ruby lunged forward and grabbed Lily, pulling her daughter protectively against her chest and turning away to shield her from the sight. But what happened next would become the stuff of local legend for generations to come. As the cub fell, the mother bear moved with surprising speed and agility. She positioned herself directly under the falling cub, rearing up at the last moment to catch her baby against her broad chest. The impact knocked her backward, but she maintained her balance, clutching the cub to her body with one massive paw. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by a stunned silence as the mother bear gently set her cub on the ground. The small creature was shaking, but appeared unharmed as it pressed itself against its mother's leg. Lily, still in Ruby's protective embrace, peeked out and made the cub-like sound once more. Softer this time, almost like a goodbye. The mother bear's head swiveled toward them, and for a brief moment her eyes met Lily's. There was no aggression in her gaze, only a deep, unfathomable intelligence that sent a shiver down Ruby's spine. Then, with her cub safely beside her, the mother bear turned and lumbered back toward the forest, moving unhurriedly, as if she had all the time in the world. The crowd parted silently before her, no one daring to make a sound until she and her cub had disappeared into the darkness of the trees. Only then did the spell seem to break. People began talking all at once, their voices a mixture of relief, awe, and lingering fear. Officer Mercer lowered her tranquilizer gun, her hands shaking slightly as she radioed in an update to dispatch. "The bears have left the fairgrounds," she reported, her voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "Repeat, the situation is, resolved. No injuries to report." What she didn't say, what she couldn't explain in an official report, was what she had just witnessed. A baby somehow communicating with a wild bear, and the bear understanding. Earl had finally regained enough composure to restart the Ferris wheel, carefully bringing each car down to unload the passengers. When Dallas, Tori, Zeke, and Vince were finally back on solid ground, they found Officer Mercer waiting for them, her expression stern. "I believe you four have some explaining to do," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. Dallas, who had been so cocky earlier, now looked pale and shaken. "We didn't think—" "That much is obvious," Officer Mercer cut him off. "You're lucky no one was killed tonight, including yourselves." As she led the teenagers away to take their statements, Ruby and Theo huddled together with Lily, who had returned to being a normal, babbling 9-month-old, showing no signs of the strange behavior she had exhibited just minutes earlier. "What just happened?" Theo asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Did you see what she did? How did she know to make that sound?" Ruby shook her head, staring down at her daughter with a mixture of wonder and confusion. "I don't know. It was like she understood what was happening. Like she knew exactly what to do." Lily smiled up at her parents, reaching for Ruby's face with sticky fingers, completely oblivious to the miraculous role she had just played. Her eyes, which had seemed so knowing and ancient during the encounter with the bear, were now just the innocent eyes of a baby again. As they made their way toward the exit, the fair now closing early due to the incident, Ruby couldn't shake the feeling that she had witnessed something beyond explanation. Something that challenged everything she thought she knew about babies, about animals, about communication itself. "Do you think anyone would believe us if we told them what really happened?" she asked Theo quietly. He glanced down at Lily, who was now happily chewing on her stuffed bunny. "I'm not sure I believe it myself, but I know what I saw." Ruby nodded, pulling Lily's stroller blanket up to protect her from the night's chill. "I think some things just can't be explained." But as they passed the edge of the forest on their way to the parking lot, Ruby could have sworn she heard a low, rumbling sound, like a mother bear calling to her cub. And for just a moment, Lily turned her head toward the sound, a small smile playing on her lips, as if she understood a secret language that the rest of them could only guess at. The connection between the baby and the bears had been real, even if it defied all logic. And in Pine Creek Valley, the night would be remembered not for the cruelty that had started it all, but for the mysterious communication between two mothers and their babies, one human, one bear, that had prevented a tragedy. As for Dallas, Tori, Zeke, and Vince, they would face consequences for their actions. But they too had been changed by what they witnessed. The incredible moment when a baby had somehow bridged the gap between species, teaching them a lesson in compassion that no punishment could ever match. The morning after the fair incident dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. The local newspaper's headline read, "Bear Cub Rescue at County Fair, Miracle or Mass Hallucination." Below, it was a blurry photo someone had captured of the mother bear catching her falling cub, though the image was too distant and grainy to show much detail. What wasn't in the paper, what couldn't be, because no editor would believe it, was the role that a 9-month-old baby had played in the whole affair. The official report stated only that the mother bear retrieved her cub and returned to the forest without incident, a sanitized version that stripped away all the wonder and mystery of what had actually happened. Ruby sat at her kitchen table, staring at the newspaper while Lily babbled happily in her high chair, smashing banana pieces between her tiny fingers. Theo was on the phone in the living room, speaking with his bank about replacing their stolen cards. Life was attempting to return to normal, but Ruby knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. "What did you do last night, sweetie?" she whispered to Lily, who responded by stuffing a mushy banana piece into her mouth and grinning. "How did you know how to call to that bear?" Lily's only answer was a string of typical baby gibberish, nothing like the eerie patterned sound she had made at the fair. Ruby sighed and wiped banana from her daughter's chin, wondering if she had imagined the whole thing. But no, Theo had seen it too, and Officer Mercer, and dozens of other witnesses. The doorbell rang, startling Ruby from her thoughts. She quickly wiped Lily's hands and picked her up before going to answer it. Standing on her porch was Officer Mercer, out of uniform but still carrying herself with the same no-nonsense authority. "Mrs. Winters, I'm Diane Mercer. We met briefly last night at the fair." Ruby nodded, shifting Lily to her hip. "Of course, I remember. Please, come in." Officer Mercer stepped inside, removing her sunglasses to reveal tired eyes. She had clearly not gotten much sleep. "I wanted to follow up with you about last night. There are some details that didn't make it into my official report." Ruby's heart skipped. "About Lily, you mean?" Mercer nodded, her gaze drifting to the baby, who was studying the officer with curious eyes. "May we sit down?" They moved to the living room, where Theo was just finishing his call. He looked surprised to see Officer Mercer, but greeted her politely before excusing himself to make coffee. "I've been on the force for 15 years, Mercer began once they were seated. "And I've responded to all kinds of animal incidents. Bears getting into trash cans, mountain lions spotted near schools, you name it. But I've never seen anything like what happened last night." Ruby swallowed. "So it wasn't just us. You saw it too. The way your daughter moved toward that bear, the sound she made, and how the bear responded?" Mercer shook her head in disbelief. "Yes, I saw it. So did about 30 other people. But you know what's strange? When I took statements afterward, almost no one mentioned it. It's like their minds couldn't process it, so they just edited it out." Lily squirmed in Ruby's lap, reaching toward Officer Mercer with grabby hands. The officer hesitated, then reached out her own hand. Lily grabbed her finger, tight and trusting. "Has she ever done anything like that before?" Mercer asked quietly. Ruby shook her head. "Never. She's just a normal baby. At least, I thought she was." Theo returned with coffee for everyone. As he set down the mugs, he asked, "What happens now?" "To those teenagers, I mean." Mercer's expression hardened slightly. "They're facing animal cruelty charges, reckless endangerment, and creating a public disturbance. The oldest, Dallas, is 17, old enough to be charged as an adult, though that's up to the DA. Good, Theo said firmly. They could have gotten someone killed. Actually, Mercer said, her voice softening, that's another reason I'm here. The ringleader, Dallas, has been asking to speak with you. With us? Ruby was shocked. Why would he want to talk to us? He keeps talking about your baby, says he needs to apologize to her. Mercer looked slightly embarrassed, as if aware of how ridiculous it sounded. Obviously, you're under no obligation to see him. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably tell him to go to hell, but... She trailed off, looking at Lily again with something like wonder in her eyes. But what? Ruby prompted. But there was something in his face when he asked. Something changed. All four of them, really. They look like they've seen a ghost, or an angel. Mercer shrugged. I thought you should know. Theo and Ruby exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Ruby nodded. We'll think about it, Theo told the officer. Is there anything else? Mercer hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small business card. This isn't official police business, but there's someone I think you might want to talk to. A professor at the university. She specializes in animal communication studies. I called her this morning. She's interested in what happened. Ruby took the card. Dr. Eliza Chen, Department of Comparative Psychology, she read aloud. Like I said, completely unofficial. But if I'd seen what your daughter did with a bear, I'd want some answers. Mercer stood, placing her untouched coffee on the table. Thank you for your time. I'll keep you updated on the case. After she left, Theo and Ruby sat in silence for a long moment, both watching Lily as she played with a strand of Ruby's hair, completely unaware of the strangeness surrounding her. Should we talk to them? Ruby finally asked. The teenagers? The professor? Theo ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. Part of me wants to just pretend none of this ever happened. Go back to our normal lives. Can we, though? Ruby looked down at her daughter. After what we saw, maybe it was just, I don't know, a weird coincidence. She made a sound. The bear was already looking for her cub. We're making connections that aren't there. But his tone lacked conviction, and they both knew he didn't believe what he was saying. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. Before they could discuss it further, a new notification popped up on Ruby's phone. It was a text from her mother, who lived 2 towns over. Are you all okay? Just saw the news about the fair. Call me. The story's spreading, Ruby murmured, showing Theo the text. Little did they know just how far and fast the story would spread. By midday, the local news stations had picked up the tale. Mother bear catches cub in midair at county fair ran across television screens throughout the region. Amateur videos began surfacing online, most showing only fragments of the incident. The cub falling, the mother bear catching it, the crowd's reaction. But one video, shot from an angle near where Ruby and Lily had been standing, showed something more. It was grainy and shaky, clearly filmed on an old phone, but it captured the moment when Lily had crawled away from her stroller and sat in front of the mother bear. The audio was poor, the baby's sounds barely audible, but it was enough to raise questions. The video went viral by mid-afternoon. Ruby's phone began ringing non-stop. Friends, family, and then strangers who had somehow gotten her number. News vans appeared on their street, reporters knocking on their door, asking for interviews about the miracle baby who talks to bears. This is insane, Theo said, peeking through the blinds at the growing media circus outside their modest home. We need to turn off our phones and lay low for a few days." Ruby was about to agree when her phone rang again. She was ready to ignore it, but the caller ID gave her pause. "Pine Creek Valley Police Department." "Hello?" She answered cautiously. "Mrs. Winters? It's Officer Mercer again. I assume you've seen the news. It's hard to miss when they're camped outside our house. I'm sorry about that. Listen, there's been a development. Those 4 teenagers, they just confessed to something else." Ruby sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" "Turns out they're the ones who've been behind a string of pickpocketing incidents at the fair, including your husband's wallet." Ruby nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "Dallas just handed over all the cash and cards they took. Said he couldn't live with himself after what happened with your daughter and the bears. Says it changed him." Ruby recalled the cruel smile she had glimpsed on the teenager's face when he was being escorted away the night before. It was hard to imagine that same person experiencing a crisis of conscience, yet here they were. "I don't understand," she said. "What does this have to do with Lily?" Officer Mercer was quiet for a moment. "He says your baby looked into his soul." A chill ran down Ruby's spine. "That's unsettling. I know this sounds crazy, but these kids are genuinely shaken up. It's like they've had some kind of religious experience, and it's not just them. I've been getting calls all morning from people who were at the fair. Everyone who saw what your daughter did, they're all saying the same thing, that there was something special happening. Something bigger than all of us." Ruby glanced at Lily, who was napping peacefully in her playpen, one chubby fist curled under her chin. She looked perfectly ordinary, just a sweet baby taking her afternoon nap. It seemed impossible that this same child had somehow communicated with a wild bear and inspired a moral awakening in a group of troubled teenagers. "What do you want us to do?" Ruby asked, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by it all. "For now, nothing. Stay inside. Don't talk to the press. I'm sending a patrol car to keep the reporters at a reasonable distance, but—" Mercer hesitated. "Dr. Chen, the professor I mentioned, she's pretty insistent about meeting Lily. Says she might be able to make sense of all this." "And you think we should talk to her?" "I think if my child did what yours did, I'd want answers. But it's entirely up to you." After hanging up, Ruby relayed the conversation to Theo. They debated back and forth, weighing the desire for privacy against the need for understanding. In the end, curiosity won out. They called Dr. Chen and arranged to meet her at the university the next morning, provided they could get past the media gauntlet that had formed around their home. That night, after finally getting Lily to sleep, Ruby stood watching her daughter's peaceful breathing. Outside, the last few persistent reporters were being moved along by a patient police officer. The house was quiet except for the soft sounds of Theo showering down the hall. Ruby thought back to the moment when Lily had locked eyes with the mother bear, that strange suspended moment when it seemed like something passed between them, some understanding that transcended the boundaries between species. She wondered what her daughter had seen in those wild eyes, what wisdom might have been exchanged in that silent communion. As if sensing her mother's thoughts, Lily stirred in her sleep. Her tiny lips moved, and a sound escaped. Not quite a word, not quite an animal call, but something in between. Ruby froze, listening intently, but Lily simply turned her head and settled back into peaceful slumber. With a mixture of wonder and trepidation, Ruby realized that her ordinary life as the mother of an ordinary child had vanished forever. Whatever path lay ahead, scientific explanations, media attention, or some greater mystery still unfolding, they would walk it together, following wherever Lily's extraordinary gift might lead them. She had no way of knowing that the events at the fair were just the beginning, that the connection between her daughter and the natural world ran deeper than anyone could possibly imagine. And that far away, deep in the forest where humans rarely ventured, something was stirring in response to Lily's awakening abilities. Something ancient and powerful that had been waiting for a bridge between worlds. The morning dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of gentle spring rain that beads on leaves and whispers against windows. Ruby dressed Lily in her favorite yellow overalls, packed a diaper bag, and prepared to face whatever the day might bring. "The patrol car is here," Theo called from the front window. "Officer Mercer's driving it herself." Ruby picked up Lily, who was unusually quiet, her eyes serious and watchful. "Ready for an adventure, sweetie?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light despite the anxiety twisting in her stomach. They made it to the car through a gauntlet of shouted questions and flashing cameras, Theo using his body to shield Ruby and Lily from the worst of the commotion. Officer Mercer, to her credit, was efficient and no nonsense, getting them safely inside the vehicle and pulling away before any of the reporters could follow too closely. "Sorry about that," she said once they were on their way. "Your story's gone national overnight. The video of Lily and the bear has over 1 million views already." "Great," Theo muttered. "Just what we needed." The University of Northern California was about a 40-minute drive from their home in Pine Creek Valley. As they traveled, the rain intensified, drumming on the roof of the police cruiser and transforming the world outside into an impressionistic blur of greens and grays. Lily remained oddly solemn throughout the journey, her usual babbling and squirming replaced by a thoughtful stillness that seemed at odds with her age. She stared out the window, occasionally reaching toward the glass as if trying to touch the passing trees. "She seems different today," Ruby whispered to Theo. He nodded, a worried crease between his eyebrows. "Maybe she senses something's up." They arrived at the university's psychology building just before 10 o'clock. Dr. Chen was waiting for them in the lobby, a petite woman in her 50s with short salt-and-pepper hair and rectangular glasses that gave her an owlish appearance. Despite her small stature, she had a commanding presence that filled the space around her. "Mr. and Mrs. Winters," she greeted them, her voice warm but professional. "Thank you for coming. And this must be Lily." Her eyes softened as they landed on the baby, the little miracle worker. They followed Dr. Chen to her office on the 3rd floor, a cluttered space filled with books, papers, and strange equipment that Ruby couldn't begin to identify. One wall was lined with framed photographs of Dr. Chen with various animals: chimps, dolphins, wolves, elephants. "I've devoted my life to studying interspecies communication," Dr. Chen explained, noticing Ruby's interest in the photos, particularly moments of understanding that seemed to transcend the usual barriers. She cleared a space on a comfortable couch for them to sit, then pulled up a chair for herself. "Before we talk about what happened at the fair, I'd like to ask you a few questions about Lily's development. Has she shown any unusual behaviors before this incident? Any particular affinity for animals?" Ruby and Theo exchanged glances. "Not really," Ruby replied. "I mean, she likes our neighbor's dog, but what baby doesn't? She's hit all her developmental milestones normally. Yes, right on schedule according to her pediatrician," Theo confirmed. Dr. Chen nodded, jotting notes on a tablet. "And there's no history of unusual abilities in either of your families? Exceptional empathy, animal handling skills, that sort of thing?" "My grandmother used to say she could predict the weather by how her cats behaved," Ruby offered with a small smile. "But I think that's pretty common." "Actually, that's exactly the kind of thing I'm interested in." Dr. Chen leaned forward. These connections we dismiss as coincidence or superstition often have roots in real perceptual abilities. She set aside her tablet and looked directly at Lily, who was sitting quietly in Ruby's lap, watching the researcher with unnerving intensity. "May I?" Dr. Chen asked, holding out her hands toward Lily. Ruby hesitated, then nodded, passing her daughter to the researcher. Lily went willingly, her eyes never leaving Dr. Chen's face. "Hello, little one," Dr. Chen said softly. "I've heard quite a story about you." What happened next would haunt Ruby's dreams for months to come. Lily tilted her head, opened her mouth, and produced the exact same patterned sound she had made to the bear at the fair, that eerie, rising and falling call that was neither human speech nor quite animal noise. Dr. Chen went very still, her expression shifting from professional curiosity to stunned disbelief. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What?" Theo demanded, half rising from his seat. "What is it?" "That sound," Dr. Chen said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's a perfect imitation of a bear cub's contact call, the specific vocalization a cub uses when separated from its mother." Ruby felt a chill run down her spine. But that's impossible. How could she know that? That's the question, isn't it? Dr. Chen was looking at Lily with new respect, almost reverence. There are documented cases of children with extraordinary auditory abilities, perfect pitch, phonographic memory for sounds. But this is different. This isn't just mimicry. Your daughter used this call intentionally, in the appropriate context, to communicate with the mother bear. "Are you saying, 'My baby speaks bear'?" Theo asked, a note of incredulity in his voice. Dr. Chen handed Lily back to Ruby, then walked to her bookshelf and pulled down a thick volume. "Have you ever heard of the concept of genetic memory? The idea that certain knowledge or abilities might be encoded in our DNA, passed down from our earliest ancestors?" "Like instinct, you mean?" Ruby asked, cradling Lily close. "Similar, but more specific. There's a theory, controversial I admit, that humans might retain subconscious connections to other species from our evolutionary past. Most of us have lost access to these ancient pathways, but occasionally—" She trailed off, looking at Lily with wonder. "Occasionally, a child is born with the old doors still open." The idea sounded like science fiction to Ruby, yet after what she had witnessed at the fair, she couldn't dismiss it entirely. "So, you think Lily has some kind of prehistoric connection to bears?" "I think it's possible, Doctor," Chen said carefully. "At the very least, she seems to have an intuitive understanding of bear vocalizations that should be impossible for a human child, especially one with no prior exposure to bears." She returned to her chair, her excitement barely contained. "With your permission, I'd like to run some non-invasive tests. Nothing that would cause Lily any distress, just some observations of her responses to various animal sounds, perhaps some play sessions with carefully selected therapy animals." Ruby looked at Theo, uncertain. "I don't know." "You have every right to be cautious, Doctor," Chen acknowledged. "But consider this, whatever gift Lily has, it saved lives at that fair. Not just the bear cub's life, but potentially human lives too. If the mother bear had attacked in her distress—" She let the sentence hang unfinished. "We need time to think about it," Theo said firmly. Dr. Chen nodded. "Of course. But there's something else you should be aware of." She turned her tablet around to show them a news article that had just been published. The headline read, "Miracle Baby or Modern-Day Mowgli. Experts weigh in on viral bear communication video." "The scientific community is taking notice," Dr. Chen said, "as are less scrupulous types who might see your daughter as a research opportunity or worse, a sideshow attraction. If you work with me, I can help manage that attention, make sure Lily is protected. Ruby felt overwhelmed. Just days ago, her biggest concern had been getting Lily to sleep through the night. Now, they were discussing genetic memory and ancient connections, with her baby somehow at the center of a growing media storm. "We appreciate your insights," she said carefully, "but we really do need some time." Dr. Chen accepted this with good grace and escorted them back to where Officer Mercer was waiting. As they prepared to leave, she handed Ruby a small envelope. "What's this?" Ruby asked. "A woman came to my office yesterday after seeing the video. She's from a nearby reservation, the Northern Paiute tribe. She asked me to give you this if I met you." Ruby opened the envelope and pulled out a small, intricately beaded bracelet sized for a baby's wrist, along with a handwritten note. "For the little one who speaks the old language. Our stories tell of children born with the gift of understanding our animal siblings. They are rare and precious bridges between worlds. This bracelet has been blessed by our elders for protection. She will need it. The forest is listening now." Ruby shivered despite the warmth of the building. She carefully tucked the bracelet and note back into the envelope, then thanked Dr. Chen and followed Officer Mercer to the exit. As they left the university, the rain had stopped, and shafts of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the surrounding hills. In the distance, the dark line of the forest was just visible, stretching away toward the mountains. "Where to now?" Officer Mercer asked as they got back into the patrol car. Ruby looked at Theo, then down at Lily, who was gazing out the window toward the forest with an expression that seemed far too knowing for a baby. "Home," Ruby said after a moment. "We need to go home and figure out what to do next." What they didn't know, couldn't know, was that a decision had already been made for them. Miles away, in the depths of the forest, the mother bear and her cub were on the move, traveling with purpose toward the edge of Pine Creek Valley, drawn by a call that only they could hear, and they were not alone. Other creatures were stirring, responding to the same silent summons, the awakening of an ancient connection that had long lain dormant. As the patrol car wound its way back down the hill, Lily pressed her tiny palm against the window, her eyes never leaving the distant tree line. And deep in the forest, something answered. 5 years later, the kindergarten classroom buzzed with the controlled chaos of 25 5-year-olds preparing for a field trip. Ms. Hernandez moved among them, helping with backpacks and reminding them about buddy system rules. At the back of the room, Lily Winters sat quietly at her table, carefully drawing in her nature journal. "What are you making, Lily?" Ms. Hernandez asked, pausing beside her. Lily looked up with those remarkable eyes, amber-flecked brown that seemed to hold wisdom far beyond her years. "It's a map," she said simply, pointing to the intricate lines that covered her page. It didn't look like any map Ms. Hernandez had ever seen, more like a web of interconnected pathways through what appeared to be a forest. "For the trail today?" the teacher asked with a smile. Lily shook her head. "Number, it's for later." Before Miss Hernandez could ask what she meant, Ruby Winters appeared at the classroom door, ready to serve as one of the parent chaperones for their field trip to the Pine Creek Valley Nature Reserve. Lily immediately brightened, carefully closing her journal and slipping it into her backpack. "Mom," she called, running to hug Ruby. Ruby knelt down to embrace her daughter, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, now longer, flowing past her shoulders in gentle waves. "Ready for the big adventure, sweetheart?" Lily nodded solemnly. "They're waiting for us." Ruby felt the familiar flutter in her chest, that mixture of wonder and unease that had become part of parenting this extraordinary child. She'd grown accustomed to Lily's cryptic comments, her uncanny knowledge of the natural world, and the strange connection she seemed to have with the animals around Pine Creek Valley. The years since the fair incident had been a journey of discovery, learning to balance protecting Lily's privacy with nurturing her unusual gift. The media frenzy had eventually died down when newer stories captured the public's attention, though they still occasionally received letters or emails from people who'd seen the video and been touched by it. Dr. Chen had remained a part of their lives, conducting gentle, respectful studies that had helped them understand Lily's abilities better, though much remained mysterious. The scientist had documented Lily's unprecedented capacity to understand and mimic animal vocalizations, not just bears, but dozens of species, each with perfect intonation and contextual understanding. After much consideration, they had chosen not to pursue any mainstream scientific studies, instead accepting guidance from the Northern Paiute elders who had recognized Lily's gift immediately. The hand-beaded bracelet still adorned Lily's wrist, though she had outgrown the original one and now wore a larger version made by the same elder who had sent the first. "Mrs. Winters, wonderful to see you," Ms. Hernandez greeted Ruby. "We're almost ready to head out." Ruby smiled and began helping to organize the excited children into lines. As one of 4 parent volunteers, she would be responsible for a group of 6 kindergartners, including Lily. It had been Lily who had insisted they sign up for this particular field trip, with an urgency that Ruby had learned not to question. "Something important is going to happen today," Lily had told her the night before, with that serene certainty that still sometimes sent shivers down Ruby's spine. The bus ride to the nature reserve was filled with the sounds of children's chatter and laughter. Lily sat quietly by the window, watching the familiar landscape roll by, occasionally whispering something under her breath that Ruby couldn't quite catch. The Pine Creek Valley Nature Reserve had been established 3 years earlier, protecting over 5,000 acres of forest, including the area where the mother bear and her cub had disappeared the night of the fair. The creation of the reserve had been unexpected. A wealthy donor had suddenly purchased the land from logging interests and donated it to conservation. The donor had remained anonymous, but Ruby had her suspicions when she noticed that the official paperwork had been handled by the same law firm that represented Dallas Reed. The former troublemaker had undergone a remarkable transformation after the fair incident. After completing his community service and probation, Dallas had gone to college to study environmental law. He still visited them occasionally, his eyes always holding a mixture of awe and residual guilt when he looked at Lily. Whatever he had experienced that night had fundamentally changed him, as it had changed all of them. When the bus arrived at the reserve's visitor center, the children poured out, their excitement amplified by the open space and fresh air. Park rangers greeted them with friendly smiles, beginning the planned program about forest ecosystems. But Lily seemed distracted, her attention drawn to the tree line beyond the visitor center. Ruby kept a close eye on her, recognizing the familiar signs of what they had come to call one of Lily's listening moments. Her head slightly tilted, eyes unfocused, as if hearing something beyond the range of normal human hearing. "Mom," Lily said quietly, tugging on Ruby's hand while the ranger was explaining about different types of trees. "We need to go that way." She pointed toward a trail that led deeper into the forest, not the beginner loop that was planned for the kindergarten group. "Honey, we need to stay with your class," Ruby reminded her gently. Lily's expression grew urgent. "Please, Mom, it's important. They're waiting." After 5 years of these moments, Ruby had learned to trust her daughter's instincts, however inexplicable they might seem. She quietly approached Miss Hernandez and the lead ranger, explaining that she and Lily needed to break away from the group briefly. "We'll catch up with you on the loop trail," she promised. "Lily just needs a moment of quiet." Ms. Hernandez, who had been briefed about Lily's special connection to nature without being given the full details, nodded understandingly. The ranger looked concerned, but agreed when Ruby assured him they would stay on marked trails. As soon as they were alone, Lily led Ruby confidently down the forest path, moving with purpose. The day was perfect. Warm sunshine filtering through the canopy, creating dappled patterns on the ground. Birds called overhead, and the sweet scent of pine needles filled the air. "Where are we going, sweetheart?" Ruby asked as they ventured deeper into the forest. "To the meeting place," Lily replied, as if this explained everything. After about 15 minutes of walking, they reached a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. Lily stopped at its edge, her expression suddenly solemn. "This is it," she whispered. Ruby looked around, seeing nothing unusual, just a peaceful forest glade, sunlight streaming down to illuminate a carpet of wildflowers. "What is it, Lily? What are we looking for?" Lily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she removed her backpack and took out her journal, opening it to the map she had been drawing earlier. "We need to wait, just for a little while." They sat together on a fallen log at the edge of the clearing, Lily seemingly content to watch the butterflies dancing among the flowers. Ruby checked her phone. They had about 20 minutes before they needed to head back to rejoin the class. "Lily," she said gently, "can you tell me why we're here?" Lily looked up at her mother, those wise eyes suddenly brimming with an emotion Ruby couldn't quite name. "To say thank you," she said, "and goodbye." Before Ruby could ask what she meant, a sound from the opposite side of the clearing caught her attention. A soft rustling in the underbrush. She instinctively pulled Lily closer, her heart rate accelerating. "It's okay, Mom," Lily said, her voice calm and sure. "It's them." From the shadows of the trees emerged a bear, not just any bear, but a large female with a distinctive white patch on her chest. Behind her followed a half-grown juvenile bear, gangly in the way of adolescence across species. Ruby's breath caught in her throat. Though it had been 5 years, she recognized them immediately. The mother bear and her cub from the fair, now much bigger but unmistakable. "Don't move," she whispered to Lily, though her daughter showed no sign of fear. The bears paused at the edge of the clearing, the mother's nose lifting to catch their scent. Ruby waited for the growl, the charge, the attack that instinct told her should follow when a mother bear encountered humans near her young. But instead, the mother bear made a soft, chuffing sound, a greeting. And to Ruby's astonishment, Lily responded with an identical sound, the vocalization emerging from her child's throat with perfect pitch and inflection. A complex series of exchanges followed, grunts, huffs, and those unique melodic calls that Ruby had first heard that night at the fair. It was a conversation, she realized with a shock. Her 5-year-old daughter was actually conversing with these wild bears. The juvenile bear took a hesitant step into the clearing, and Ruby tensed again. But Lily placed a small hand on her arm. "It's all right. He remembers me. He wants to say thank you." As if understanding her words, the young bear, the same cub who had been taped to the Ferris wheel 5 years ago, lowered his head in a gesture that looked remarkably like a bow. Then, to Ruby's further amazement, other animals began to appear at the edges of the clearing. A fox with her kits, a family of deer, raccoons, even a majestic, great horned owl that landed silently on a nearby branch. "They've been watching over us," Lily explained, her voice filled with a simple joy. "Ever since that night, they're the guardians." "Guardians?" Ruby managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily nodded solemnly. "They protect the valley, and me, but now they have to go deeper into the forest. People are coming, more people, building things." She looked sad for a moment. That's why I needed to say goodbye. The mother bear made another sound, and Lily responded. Then, with deliberate movements, the bear approached them, stopping about 10 feet away. Ruby's every instinct screamed at her to grab Lily and run, but she remained frozen in place, trusting her daughter in a way that defied logic. The bear rose briefly onto her hind legs, not in aggression, but as if to get a better look at them. In her massive paw, Ruby noticed something clutched gently. A small branch of berries, which the bear carefully placed on the ground before them. A gift, Lily explained, to remember them by. Then, with another soft chuff, the mother bear dropped back to all fours and turned away. One by one, the assembled animals melted back into the forest, the juvenile bear being the last to leave, casting a final glance over his shoulder before disappearing among the trees. In the sudden quiet of the clearing, Ruby found her voice again. "Lily, how long have you been meeting them like this?" "Since I was 3, Lily said simply. "But this is the last time. They're going to the high mountains now, where it's safer." She looked up at Ruby, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'll miss them." Ruby pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, her own eyes filling with tears. She thought of all the times Lily had asked to play in the backyard alone, or had slipped away during family hikes, moments that Ruby had attributed to normal childhood independence. How many secret meetings had there been? How many conversations in a language no human was meant to understand? "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked softly. Lily's answer was both childlike and ancient in its wisdom. "Some things aren't meant for telling, Mom. They're just for knowing, in here." She placed a small hand over her heart. Ruby nodded, understanding flowing between them in a way that transcended words. She looked around the peaceful clearing, trying to commit every detail to memory. The dappled sunlight, the wildflowers, the small branch of berries left as a parting gift. "We should get back to your class," she said eventually, checking her phone. "They'll be wondering where we are." As they stood to leave, Lily carefully picked up the bear's gift, wrapping it in a handkerchief and placing it in her backpack along with her journal. She took one last look around the clearing, then slipped her hand into Ruby's. "Mom?" she said as they started back down the trail. "Yes, sweetheart? I'll always be me, you know, even without them." Ruby squeezed her daughter's hand, tears threatening again. "I know, Lily, and that's more than enough." As they walked back through the sun-dappled forest, Ruby thought about the journey they had been on these past 5 years. The fear and wonder, the questions and discoveries, the precious gift of raising a child who moved between worlds with such grace. Whatever lay ahead for Lily, whether her abilities would fade with age or evolve into something even more extraordinary, Ruby knew their lives had been forever changed by that night at the fair when a baby had somehow called out to a bear, bridging an ancient divide between species. Some would call it miracle. Others might seek scientific explanations, but Ruby had come to see it simply as part of the mystery of life. The countless invisible connections that bind all living things together, most of which remain beyond our understanding. And while the rest of the world would forget the viral video and move on to the next sensation, here in Pine Creek Valley, the story would be told for generations. The tale of a baby who spoke the old language and the bear cub she saved, and how their brief encounter had awakened something ancient and beautiful that had been sleeping in the forests and mountains since time immemorial. As they reached the edge of the forest, returning to the world of school buses and scheduled activities, Ruby heard a distant sound, the farewell call of a mother bear, echoing through the valleys and ridges of her mountain home. Beside her, Lily smiled, a look of perfect peace on her face. Some bonds, Ruby realized, transcended time and species and understanding. Some connections, once formed, could never truly be broken. And in that knowledge was a kind of magic that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. "Ready to go back?" Ruby asked softly. Lily nodded, stepping out of the forest shadows into the bright sunshine. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. "I'm ready for what's next." Hand in hand, mother and daughter walked back toward the visitor center, carrying with them the precious secret of the forest and its guardians, a story written not in words, but in the silent language of compassion that had first sparked to life on a fateful night at a county fair, when a bear cub was taped to a Ferris wheel, and a baby with no words somehow knew exactly what to say.